All right, welcome along to this week's RTÉ Soccer Podcast. Raf Diallo here. As always, you can get the latest episodes on this podcast wherever you normally get them, from YouTube, Apple and Spotify, and also on RTE.ie. Lots on the menu today. St. Pat's and Shamrock Rovers are in the midst of their European ties, with the second legs to come this week, so we'll reflect on the first leg performances, which was particularly notable from St. Pat's point of view. There's also the weekend's domestic action and second round of matches in the Premier League as well. And delighted to be joined by Graham Gartand and David McMillan to chat about all of the above and more. Hope you're both keeping well.
Yeah, thanks, Rob.
Good stuff. And there's supposed to be a big announcement this week, of course, and it's not Oasis potentially reforming and the Gallagher brothers putting the pitchforks down and coming back together. The Republic of Ireland men's squad will be named on Thursday by Heimir Hallgrimsson, and John O'Shea and Paddy McCarthy will play the biggest role in terms of picking that first squad, according to the manager himself. And he was speaking at a Q&A with Irish supporters, which was hosted by Will O'Callaghan at Lansdowne Road last week. And one of the things he touched on was the need to have, quote unquote, a real bastard in his team. And David, I suppose to define that term, bastard, in this sense, in terms of the footballing sense, it's somebody, maybe the type of player you would hate to come up against on the pitch, just with the way they approach things, but you'd love to have in your own team. I don't know, are they a bit of a dying breed in a certain sense?
Yeah, I think it's always you consider your number six probably as that type of player generally. Graham might disagree, maybe the centre half as well, but particularly, like, obviously Roy Keane over the years would be the one you'd think of, and his kind of fiery relationship with Patrick Vieira would be the two standouts from I suppose my era. And I think Ireland over the years have probably been known for having that sort of that difficult to play against sort of mentality, and that's probably what Hallgrimsson's sort of getting at, trying to get back to that a little bit. And whether it's there in the current crop, there probably is one or two that could do that job. Certainly James McLean was probably one who's always put in a tough tackle over the years. Maybe his time has obviously come and gone, but it is probably slightly a dying breed, I think, just in the way the game's reffed even. You certainly wouldn't get away with what Graham Souness might have got away with 20, 30 years ago. So but yeah, I think his point is valid. We need to get back to be difficult to beat, and have players that are willing to put their foot in and get stuck in and make life difficult when teams come to the Aviva.
Yeah, I suppose Jason Malumbi was auditioning for the role during pre-season based on one of those matches, a little bit of a punch-up during one of their games. But Graham, for yourself, from your own time playing, were there many of those within the league that you would have come up against?
Oh,
where you thought,
yeah.
like, I hate coming up against them, but when you're playing with them, they're the type of people you want in the trenches with you.
Do you know what? I probably because I ended up working with him later on a lot of the time. Like, Shane Robinson was a right winger that would go on the outside, pacey, but what a tough tackling player. Like, he ended up playing midfield. I know but always looked after himself. Always made sure he was never like hurt in a tackle. Like, he was clever, but he had a nastiness. And Shane had this thing where he was. The way you looked at it is you're as good a teammate as you can be, and you don't really care what the opposition thinks of you. And it's getting rid of that niceness of trying to appease everybody. And he probably had that in abundance, where by the time me and him, we used to go at each other when he was at Rovers and I was at Longford. And if he came inside, I'd smack him and he'd do the same. And then later on, when we signed for Drogheda, then we end up becoming, you become friends with him because you knew that he was going to do the same for your team. But there was loads around back then, that the league was full of that type of players that just were out for their own team, and that was it. On here, he'd been an example, and then you had other lads that would be clever. Where Kevin Hunt was clever footballer, like you'd never see Kevin get injured neither. That he was clever where they could play. And then you even centre forwards that used to come up to it. Kevin McHugh up at Derry would just step across you with an elbow, and you knew, like, and every team's had that type of players. But now that we're all on the other side of it. But Paddy McCarthy was like it. He was on the staff. I played with Paddy when we were younger. He would have been my age group. I played with him at Stella Maris and then in around the Ireland teams. And Paddy was like that. Paddy would drive his team and become difficult to beat, and don't care about what the opposition think of you as long as you stay in the game. And I think that thing of being nice or trying to appease everybody from an Irish point of view, that needs to go. Like, we need, like, it, yeah, we want to be good at everything. We want to play better football. We want to be better defensively. We want to be better in the counter attack. but see this thing coming to Ireland, and it's going to be a nice atmosphere, and it's going to be really good to play in and all that. Just that needs to change and needs to be ramped up, and that just comes with intensity. So yeah, I was I would have played with a few of them. Yeah.
Yeah, now, of course, the squad being named on Thursday. But what we're going to switch focus to now is the League of Ireland sides in Europe. Of course, Pats are in playoff action in the Europa Conference League, and their first leg was a creditable 0-0 draw against Istanbul Basaksehir at Talas Stadium, and the second leg will be this Wednesday. And David, I suppose to put the performance into context, how highly do you rank that first leg performance from Pats to get a result against a team as as talented as Istanbul Basaksehir?
Yeah, I think they're maybe not a team that people will know very well, but the standard of the league in Turkey will be exceptionally high, and for St. Pat's to go out and put in a performance that they did and be unlucky to not have won the game. In reality, they had a couple of good opportunities across the 90 minutes, but played with a real energy, and probably what they've been lacking a little bit in their league form, they've brought into Europe. They've shown some real quality, kind of settled team in Europe, which I think has helped them. And the players that you expect a lot from, the likes of Mulroney, Elbazetti, who's come in, Palmer's shown a lot of talent as well in the last couple of weeks. Forrest are kind of coming to the fore. It's those players are starting to show their quality that I think over the league campaign you're kind of questioning where's that been, a little bit like how can they produce this in Europe and not in the league. So but it was a huge performance from them, and it gives them a real chance obviously going over there. Now I expect to totally, I've played in a lot of kind of away European games where you've played at home and you think we've got the match of this team, and you go away from home and suddenly it's just up a whole nother level. You'll have an incredible atmosphere over there, I've no doubt, and their support will be just like nothing the players have probably experienced before. So I think their staff, obviously Stephen and Gartz and the likes, they'll have experienced that before. They'll be trying to get that across to the players to what to expect in an away game in Turkey. And look, it'll be a huge task going away from home. The FAI have obviously tried to help them out with postponing the Dundalk game to give them the proper preparation for it. But it is a huge task still. But when we take Thursday on its merits as one game, it's a brilliant performance. And to go, I think from Pat's perspective, the important thing is that they're going over there with an opportunity to still go through. If they'd lost 2 or 3-0 at home, it'd be a real dead rubber, and it would, at least for the fans going across, it feels like the tie's fully alive. And look, they have every opportunity. We with Dundalk we lost the home to Hajduk Split, a similar sort of atmosphere away, and we managed to win the game away from home. We didn't go through on away, or I think we lost on aggregate, but Kenny has previous to go and produce away performances, so it'll take something magical to go through, but they've given themselves every opportunity.
Yeah, and he was speaking to Tony O'Donoghue after that first leg, so let's just listen to what the St. Pat's manager had to say.
Stephen, you've given yourself a right chance after a really good performance this evening.
Yeah, we're still in the tie, very much so. I feel, to get into the group stages for where we've come from, 7th place in the league would be monumental by the players, and I think they've shown it in the European games. Like we've been underdog in every round, and we've been absolutely brilliant in Europe. And tonight, first half, were absolutely outstanding. They beat Manchester United 2-1, and we played them off the park there for the first half, and absolutely had some great efforts. But obviously, they showed their quality as the game went on, and they are an exceptional team. And we're gonna. Obviously, going into the Lions Den, we pressed aggressively, very high tonight. You won't always be able to do that in the heat, but I think, we're still very much in the tie, and the players know that, and they need to know it, because we're only 90 minutes away now. We didn't lose the game, we didn't concede anything, we didn't concede any chances in the match, I didn't feel. So that was it was a good performance.
Can I ask you about the performance of Mason Melia at 16 years of age, and he bossed things up front and he made things happen, and he had a couple of chances himself?
Yeah, no, Mason's a credit to himself, really. It's a tough job, and he's relentless pressing off the ball, but he gave us a lot tonight in the channels. He won a lot of free kicks. He obviously had a great chance early on from the header, just went wide, and he was a handful all night for their defenders, who are very high caliber defenders. So
he'll be no surprise to them in the second leg next Wednesday.
No, I don't think he was a surprise. They would have done their homework and seen the previous European games, so our team was the same as it was last week against Sabah, so they knew who we were playing, and so I don't think that was it.
How important has the consistency of selection been, though? You know, you've got a shape in your team now, and everyone seems to know their job.
Yeah, obviously we've lost Ramal Palmer. He seems to have tweaked a medial ligament injury, so just unfortunate. But Cian Levy came on, and just one moment of outstanding skill to beat two players the way he did at speed and crack it from outside just the edge of the box to off the inside of the post and out. It was hard to believe it didn't go in. It was such a brilliant bit of skill, and he was just so unlucky.
So it's next Wednesday. You don't even have a full week, but like I say, you're really giving yourself a chance now.
Yeah, it's because it's an early kick-off over there, and because they're 2 hours ahead of us. Obviously, we've it's 5.5 days. So the Turkish League have given all the Turkish teams the weekend off who are in Europe to prepare for the Champions League and Europa League games. But we've 90 minutes in Dundalk on Sunday before we fly out. So we've tough schedule, and we'll just have to try and get through that and get ourselves ready, because the game in Istanbul is probably one of the most important games in St. Pat's history, one of the most important games in their history, and the club has been a long time in existence, so it's an opportunity that we want to grasp.
All right, that is Stephen Kenny there. Of course, the Dundalk situation in terms of that game, that was, of course, postponed to Thursday, the 5th of September. We'll come back to that from the Dundalk point of view very shortly. But I suppose, Graham, on the other side of it, in terms of, he mentioned Cian Levy and that bit of magic where he hits the post. There's Mason Melia's performance up front. You would think it's supposed to be a backs to the wall performance and you just kind of hang in there. But the way Pats were structured, they carried quite a bit of a threat from time to time, and now a lot of them were half chances. But how did they make that work?
Pace. And David will know. And one of the things, and I'm listening to Stephen talk there, and David's probably getting flashbacks of how much he builds his teams up in Europe to feel that you can go out and achieve something, and he gives the players that belief. The pace they have on the front line, El Bazzetti, Jake Mulroney and Mason Melia will get you up the pitch. So if you are sitting deep, and Istanbul had a lot of possession, probably had over 55% possession, but they held their shape well, but they knew that they had a threat going forward. Ramal Palmer has been excellent for them the last month, so they would have been disappointed losing him, but Cian Levy's a ball carrier. And if he plays off the front, and we've seen it in the cup final, he will drive at teams and carry the ball. But Mason Melia, the talk of him, like I would have seen Mason play under 14s with Joey St. Joseph Boys, Bray, I think at the time, and he was excellent. Real powerhouse. Collects the ball, but he's one of those strikers that can hold the ball up. He's pacey enough to run in behind and down the sides, and if he can. And he will add more goals to his game because he get more chances, but he will take the game to people. His physicality's improved because he's playing men's football the last 6 months. So yeah, look, going over there is going to be a really tough task, and it's a different atmosphere. And like David said, you can play a team and think, yeah, we're okay here, and then you go over, and all of a sudden you're thinking this is a completely different team. The tempo changes, the whole atmosphere around changes, but Pats have. The one thing that Tony touched on was the consistency of their lineup. The back four is a bit more settled. The goalkeeper's more settled. Soyberg's come in at right back and done really well, and they've struggled since Curtis has left. Grabowski's come in and been a mainstay beside Redmond, where Redmond was struggling for a partner since the middle of last summer. So they've got consistency in their back line, which helps as well.
Yeah, and from the back line as well, Graham, I mean, is there a risk of sitting too deep as well? We might touch on it in terms of the Shamrock Rovers game as well, because that seemed to be a facet, especially with the own goal that Cleary scored in that. But where do you set up that back line in terms? Obviously, you will be on the back foot, I guess.
Your back line's set up compared to what the pressure you have on the ball. So if there's high pressure on the ball, you can go up the pitch. If there's no pressure and the head's up and they're looking forward, then you have to give respect to where the ball is. So your line is always in relation to the ball. The only time you can squeeze when there's no pressure on the ball is when there's no threat over the top. So you have to look and say, look, we've no real threat over the top, and there's no pressure on the ball. We can squeeze a little bit. But yeah, you do have to be careful that you don't get backed in. And this is where your back four work really kicks in, it can be frustrating doing it, but it's that constantly clearing out your box. So you have your tiers in your box, right? We're on the 6-yard line. Can we get to the penalty spot? Can we get to the 18? Can we get to the edge of the D? Oh, we're dropping 5, yeah, and you're moving them 5-10 yards up and down all the time. You're constantly trying to give your keeper more space that he can see the flight of the ball as early as possible. So you're constantly getting up all the time, and it's tough work, and it's hard for defenders when they're, obviously we're a bit taller. We have to move our feet a little bit more, but you have to constantly get out of the box as much as you can, and you're going to be tired, but mentally, can you keep squeezing that line to make sure that you're giving keeper enough chance to get vision on the ball or vision on the cross?
Yeah, and Pats, from their point of view, of course, it's Wednesday, the second leg, potentially Turkish delight if it works out, as in terms of what they're looking for, both for the league and for themselves. But there's Dundalk as well, as we said, the game that they were supposed to play against Pats on Sunday being postponed, and John Daly wasn't happy about that, and neither was Brian Ainscough, the owner. Daly said to call off a game 46 hours before it is due to get underway is farcical. I think it shows that if you make enough noise and apply pressure in the right areas, you can clearly get your way. The reason that the FAI have outlined for postponing the game was relevant last Thursday when St. Patrick's Athletic qualified for the playoff round as they are today. A decision could easily have been made at that point to postpone the game. From a football point of view, we will have gone 21 days without a competitive game. That is completely unacceptable at a stage of the season where we have just 9 fixtures to play. The issue of sporting integrity also has to be called into question. Clubs in and around us have already had and will have the benefit of playing clubs on the back of European fixtures. There is zero consistency. We constantly hear about how we need to grow the league and make it more professional, but this decision makes it look anything but. And David, I suppose there's two sides to this, of course, from I suppose the Pats point of view and also from the league. Progress in Europe is something that is sought after, but of course Dundalk are there as well. They will want to play their fixtures. They're in the midst of a relegation battle. Where do you stand on it in terms of, I suppose, the differing views on it?
I think it's pretty simple. The timing is horrendous. If the decision was made when Pats qualified, I don't think anybody would have kicked up too much of a fuss. Obviously, Dundalk still wouldn't have been happy about it. They want to play, a tired Pats team. I think realistically, Pats would have had to probably change nearly their whole 11 to try and to face Dundalk because of the quick turnaround in 6 days. But to make the decision, like, it looks like the FAI have just said, well, if Pats lose heavily here on Thursday, we won't bother calling it off. And if they have a chance, we'll call it off, which is just the wrong approach. Totally. I would love to know when those Turkish teams that have the weekend off, I'd say that decision was made well in advance, or maybe it's an agreed thing every year that's the approach they take. Whereas with us, it's ad hoc. It's make the decision on a whim, put out a statement. The statement says it's a unique opportunity because 2 teams are going to qualify. So if Rovers hadn't qualified, would they have called the game off because only one team was going to qualify, had the chance? Like, it just doesn't make any sense in terms of the timing. And as I said, I don't think Dundalk probably still would have had a gripe if it was called off last week. When Pats, say a couple of days after Pats qualified, they still probably wouldn't have been happy about it, but you would accept it. I think to call it off 46 hours before the kickoff is shambolic, really. And I do think it's the right decision in terms of, I think the decision should have been taken early and given Pats the best opportunity. And the same for any club. I've been in that position. We came back from Russia, played St. Petersburg and had to go and play a cup final, 2 or 3 days later. And it was like the cup final was never going to be moved. And we accepted that. We understood it's part of being successful is you have to play regularly, you have to play a lot of games. We lost the cup final off the back of it, but you accept it, you be successful, you have a lot of matches to play, and that's part and parcel of the game. And Pats have a good enough squad to deal with both of those things, but I think it's just all about the time. And Raf, it's just it looks terrible, and I can understand why Dundalk feel very aggrieved about it, and other teams as well.
Obviously
Rovers in the past have looked for games off where they were going through their European rounds, and they didn't get it. So it's I think it doesn't look great.
Yeah, now Shamrock Rovers, they were playing on Sunday against Galway. We'll come to that, a 1-1 draw. But before that, of course, they were playing PAOK in the Europa League playoff round, first leg, losing 4-0. And with Dan Cleary, which I mentioned earlier, an own goal just in first half stoppage time. And then Tyson scoring just after half time. And then a couple of other goals. And also Josh Honohan getting sent off as well, 7 minutes after the break. Now, in terms of the setup, Graham, 4-0, obviously it's a fairly comprehensive result, but they didn't concede until very late in the first half. But PAOK had started knocking on the door at that stage, and it's either side of half time where things kind of fell apart. So in regards to, yes, there's defensive errors, but would you have been happy with the overall kind of tactical setup the Rovers put out?
Yeah, they had loaded up in midfield. Ferrugia was playing in midfield as well, which gives them legs. Dylan Watts beside Gary O'Neill, excellent, and covered the ground. And then Trevor Clark's injury probably just be getting down that side when he goes off. I think Honohan has to come over and go left wing back, and he probably get in down that side a little bit, because I think the best player is the right winger. Zebeskev, I think, is his name, and he started becoming dangerous, and it's just that cleared in that box to get out for the cross. It's an in-swinging cross. It's a hard one for Cleary, because unless he hears something from his goalkeeper, he doesn't know where he is, and it's that thing of, I have to go and head this. And I'd like to see a goalkeeper be a little bit more instructive in that situation and say, look, keepers are, he's coming across to get it and he doesn't need to head it, but he feels he has to throw his head on it and it goes in. And it is a bit of a killer when you can see the goal like that, in that it's probably your own doing a little bit, where you're like, oh. But the second goal is brilliant, great movement, and they smash into the top corner. Honohan's second yellow is a little bit harsh. He gets his first yellow for not taking a throw in quick enough. I think Pauls had gone down injured, and then when the game was restarting, the ref was like, right, get on with it, and then he booked him. So he can count himself a little unlucky, and then with 4-0, then you scored late on. I think they missed a penalty as well. Well, not missed a penalty, Paul saved it. So could have been worse, but look, this is the level you're up against with PAOK. They won the championship in Greece. They've been excellent last year. I think they got to the quarter final of the Europa League last season as well. So you're going up in levels again, and it just shows you. Do I think we'll ever get to that stage? I'm not sure, but it just shows you where you need to be. The Europa League has become so difficult to break into because of the knockdown method that UEFA have now. But look, Rovers will be happy with the fact that they've guaranteed group stages in the Europa Conference. It gives them, 6 more games in Europe going between now and the end of the season. So they just have to go, and you take your medicine in these games and you come home and go, right, let's just gear up for the Europa League. And it looks like they've done that, obviously bringing Danny Mandroiu back too.
Yeah, and just as Graham said there, David, I mean, it is more, I suppose, a learning experience, chastening enough in its own way, but given that there is Conference League group stage football to come, and the third European group stage that Rovers will have had in their history, just the fifth time that an Irish club will have experienced that, there is something to fall back on, and I suppose they can just take lessons from what happened against PAOK.
Yeah, it's just, I think the time of the first goal is the real killer, right before half time, and that's probably unsettled them a wee bit. If you go in at 0-0, you kind of get a breather and really try and dig something out. It's probably a similar scenario, I suppose, to what I'm trying to picture for St. Pat's, away from home. Greek, Turkish atmosphere is always lively, and the Pats players probably do well to even watch that game and get a feel for what it might be like in a hot, sticky atmosphere like that. But yeah, I think for Rovers, look, there is the fallback that they've qualified for the groups, and hopefully they can use this game as something to kind of build off into their group stage campaign, because this is the type of opponent they're likely to have in the groups. And obviously, look, a lot of those players have been there before, the likes of Graham Burke, Jack Byrne, Lopez, they've all experienced the group stages, and that might help them as well with this campaign, because I think even their result at the weekend or yesterday against Galway, their league campaign hasn't been anywhere near what I would have expected from them, and what the standards that they've set over the last 5 years have been incredible. and they've just fallen short of that. And I feel like their focus now is on how this European campaign goes. So I think from Stephen Bradley's own personal perspective and from the players' perspective, they'll want to have a good campaign in the group stages and get as many points as they can, because even before yesterday, I felt if they could win that league game, they still have a chance to go on and win the league, and maybe they still do. But I feel like their focus has slightly come off the league and has jumped onto Europe to say, right, well, at least let's have a successful campaign in the group stages. Let's get points on the board and do as well as we can. And if that's their main focus for the year and they do well in that, then I think the fans will be happy enough, because their league campaign, not sure how, has just slipped kind of just so much below where their standards they've set over the last 4 or 5 years.
Yeah, now before we move on to the League of Ireland itself and the weekends, or the results from the weekend, whether it was Sunday with Shamrock Rovers or prior to that on the Friday, of course, there was a statement released last week by Shamrock Rovers, and it was just after we recorded last week's podcast, and it was in regard to the European games not being shown on free-to-air television. So I'm just going to read their statement first, and we'll get your thoughts. But they said in their statement, the club exhausted every avenue across the 4 rounds of European matches to deliver matches on a free-to-air national broadcaster, but to no avail. Live streaming has provided fans with the option to follow the hoops home and away in Europe in July and August. It has been a disappointment that these thrilling games have not been showcased to a wider Irish audience, and now the visit of PAOK will not be broadcast on terrestrial Irish TV. And they did address their unhappiness with RTÉ Sport in particular for not acquiring the rights, adding that the club is considering if it will facilitate any future requests from the national broadcaster to show the SSE Electricity Premier Division fixtures from Tala Stadium in 2024. Graham, I suppose your thoughts on that?
Yeah, it's a visualization for young players to see teams on the telly that they can identify with, and representation of players coming through and playing at the highest level, to believe one day that they can get there. I'm well aware we're on an RTÉ podcast and I've had conversations, but I do believe that the game should have been shown at some stage. Not to back RTÉ here, so the rights were up for everybody. Anyone could have done it, not just RTÉ. I think RTÉ gets the most sort of publicity around it is because they're a national broadcaster, and it's been seen that they have to be promoting the game. And I think that we all have to be, we keep saying that we all have to be behind League of Ireland football, and we do, but we need to act on that and say, right, let's put this in place, that these are what's coming. I get all the caveats around it. I get that there's the Euros, I get that there's the Olympics, I get that the staff are on their knees, for all these things. I totally do. And I've sympathy for all of that. But there has to be a way that these can be shown. Particularly, and you pick a game, whether it's Pats or the Rovers game, you show one of them and say, look, we're behind this. And I'll come back in the long run going forward. So I get that the onus will always fall on RTÉ because they're the national state broadcaster, and that's the way they get the most stick for it. But it was up for other people to show as well. But yeah, it's a tough one because you want these games to be seen. You want players representing Ireland on a European stage to be seen, and you want to show it, and that helps grow the game from a sponsorship point of view as well. That can bring finances in. So I'm not abstaining from saying it. That's what I believe. I think it's right. I think going forward there has to be dialogue between RTÉ, the FAI, and the league to say what's best in terms of how to run this properly. That we're not flooded with European games at this point in time. I think going back to David's point regarding the fixtures as well, there has to be dialogue with the European clubs to say, right, where do you want your week break? Because we front load the games on a Monday night, which wasn't the case. I'm not sure if that was the case when David played. It wasn't the case when I played when you were in Europe. But there's also a midweek break during the season now that was brought in originally, I think, for the Special Olympics. Now, we're still doing that, and there's a spare week that Pats could have said, look, we can put a game in that because we got a boy. So how do you align it so that everybody comes out of this looking right? And all it comes down to is dialogue between the clubs, the FAI, and the TV companies to say what's best for the league going forward. Not what's best for individual clubs, what's best for our league going forward. And if they can all sit down and do that and move this on, hopefully it doesn't ever happen again. And that would be the outcome I'd be looking for.
Yeah, and David, your thoughts as well?
Yeah, I think what Graham said there is let's not have it happen again. And it's the same with the fixture postponement. If there's a policy, if you like, in place that says, okay, I said off air earlier, I think Shamrock Rovers' first game, the league winner's first game in Europe, let's nail that down. That's going to be showed every year, first and foremost, because we can lose that game and teams can sink out of Europe. But if we put that as our showcase game every year, it's on RT. It's one of the whatever package of games that RT is going to show each season. And then, there's other real, if there's a playoff game, we'll guarantee we can show those things. So if there's something there the clubs know that's going to be there, right? Well, the league winner's first European game will be shown, and any playoff games will be shown. That's it. I think that the clubs will get behind that. RT know where they stand. Clubs know where they stand. It's probably not as simple as that. I might be making it out to be sound really, really simple, but that to me seems like a way forward that clubs would find acceptable. I think RT would find acceptable. Certainly, I think even for numbers, for viewers, you're more likely to get, I'm sure, a bigger crowd watching a team like PAOK versus Shamrock Rovers, or as someone said, if St. Pat's had drawn Chelsea, would it have been shown on RT? Probably, unless there's some rights issues. So it's trying to guarantee those games, and they're the ones that are likely to get the biggest viewership anyway. And it brings it to a wider audience, which I think is what any League of Ireland fan would like, is to get more people in the doors at games physically. And the way you do that is to gain interest. People might start by watching games on TV, these bigger games, and then again, it brings people to stadiums. So I think from everybody's point of view, it's knowing where you stand. And I do understand from RT's perspective that I believe they've told the clubs very early on last year with the package of sport that's been on this summer that these games may not be shown. So I think there has been clarity in that, but I can understand the club's frustration. Every other country they're playing in, the games are being shown there, and we're not showing them here. Our top clubs playing in Europe, it's disappointing. But as I said, if we can have a clear policy going forward, I think that just helps everybody.
Yeah, and we're going to turn our attentions to the League of Ireland now in terms of the weekend's results. And first off, though, it's Dodge on Twitter with just the stats on the 10 clubs at the moment. It feels like a league nobody wants to either get relegated from or to win at this stage. So at the top of the table, Derry, 1 win in 4. Shells, who have a game in hand on them, no win in 4. Waterford lost 4 of their last 5. Sligo, who were on a really good run up until losing their cup game against UCD, lost their last game 7-0. We'll obviously talk about that match very shortly. Shamrock Rovers, 5 wins in their last 15. Galway have only scored 23 goals in 27 games. Pats have 1 away win. Bows have the worst home record. Drogheda have conceded 50, and Dundalk are obviously at the moment rock bottom. So I'm not sure if there's good news there for anybody at that stage. So there's wins there somewhere, but anyway, for the most part, anyway, let's start off on Shells and Bows because they drew 1-1 at the on Friday night, and that meant Shells dropped off the top of the table at least for the moment, albeit they have a game in hand on Derry, Graham. But looking at it, Shells actually seemed like, I suppose both teams were vulnerable defensively, but Shells in particular seemed a little bit more vulnerable than what we've been used to.
Yeah, that would be the caveat, and that would be that we don't normally associate that with Shelbourne, that they look like they could be Gara, and that we haven't really seen that from them this season. I think they've only, because I'm not sure, I think their goal difference is 12, and they haven't conceded a lot of goals by the looks of it. Like, not sure what their goal against is, but they've been excellent defensively, really strong. They built their base off that, and it's given them a platform to go on. But it's probably the best I've seen Bows play. We done the game for RTE there the last time, and I think Bows ended up beating them 2-0 or 2-1, and we were at it. And Shells weren't great on the night. It wasn't a great game. The pitch wasn't great, but Bows went away. But that's probably the best I've seen Bows play under Reynolds. I was at the game that the drew 2-2 with Drogheda, and they were playing, but probably without the tempo that they played with on Friday was a little bit higher, and they punched the ball through, and Grant was excellent. It's probably the best I've seen him play since he's come back to Bows. They were really, really good, played quick, were on the front foot, and the open, I wouldn't say the open Shells up continuously, but they found themselves in the good areas, and they played from back to front through midfield really, really quick. But Shells, like, again, yeah, what do you say? Like, nobody's shown great form, and the team that's probably in the best form or looking at it are the team on the up is Drogheda at the moment, but everyone else seems to be like one step forward, two steps back a little bit. But Shells will still think, right, regroup. It's it's a game. It's a result. It's a 1-1 draw against Bows. Like, at home, it could be a good point at the end. They didn't lose. I probably felt last year they might have lost the game. It's a really good goal from Ali Coote. And they're still there. Like, and you can see the players that they're bringing in are strong and going to make them stronger. But yeah, they just need to regroup a little bit and reset and go, look, this is what we are. This is our identity. Defensively, we're solid. We are going to play. JJ Lunny will play in midfield. Coyle will play in midfield. But going back to building that off a solid base again. And that's where your confidence will come from, because the front players can look and go, back four's on it. Our midfield are strong. We're okay. All I need is one bit of magic and we win the game. And that's what gives the strikers confidence to know one chance and we're winning here. But yeah, from Bo's point of view, like I said, it's probably the best they played. And first half especially, I thought they were really, really good. So sometimes the team turns up and just shows up and plays. But regarding the other form in the league, like where do you go? Pats are flying in Europe, but they're sitting in 7th. They're on -3 goal difference. Bows are on -5. Like, it's Sligo are in the top half on -6 goal difference. Like, it's just strange. It used to be that you could average 2 points a game and win the league. I think a few teams back in the day blasted that. Dundalk's team would have went through that. Rovers in the last few years have gone beyond that. But I think it's looking like it might be this year that an average of 2 points wins you the league.
Yeah, and Shells' slip up though, David. I mean, that allowed Derry City they had the opportunity to try and go top, which they did, but it took quite a bizarre goal for that to happen at Waterford.
Yeah, it's I've been probably a bit hard on goalkeepers, but I think watching games back over the last couple of weeks, there's been some pretty bad errors, and yeah, the game, like the game between Derry and Waterford, seemed like there was action at both ends. Both sides could have had, McMillan hitting the post. Darley goes very close for Waterford. Patterson hits the post. There's a lot of real fine line moments that probably should be defining the game one way or the other. A bit of magic from one player or the other, and in the end, it's just a bad mistake from Louis Jones in Waterford's net. It's a high cross from Cameron Dummigan from the right hand side, and Ben Doherty just sort of tries to head it across into the box. It's kind of looping under the goalkeeper. He looks like a comfortable take for him on his goal line, and it sort of slips between the hands, bounces off his head, I think. And I'm not even 100% sure it went over the line or not. The linesman has called it, and
I think Patrick Coben had the hand up anyway.
Yeah, Patrick is always going to claim that for sure. No, look, it's a bad mistake, and it happens. It's just one of those moments. I think the keeper's just he thinks he has it in his hands. He's probably thinking, how's he going to distribute it? And suddenly it's between his hands and off his head and into the back of the net. So, look, Derry have probably not been flying, as you pointed out by the statistics there. They hadn't won in 3 games. And prior to that, I think they'd won maybe 4 on the bounce. So it's that kind of league. It's just that if anybody can win that 3, 4, 5 games on the bounce, they've really put themselves in a hell of a strong position. And I think Derry's record against Waterford, I think they've beaten them 4 times this season in the 4 games. So that's been massive for them in terms of where they are on the league table. Waterford won't be too happy about it, particularly how it was decided on Friday. But this stage of the season, Higgins won't care. He'll take the points any way they come. And as I said, it was a nip and tuck game. I think probably a draw would have been a fair result overall, but one small error decides the match, and it's a big 3 points for Derry, because obviously puts them now top of the table, puts a little bit more pressure on Shells, particularly when they're on a slightly, it's hard to say a bad run. They haven't won in 4, but they weren't great on Friday. They weren't terrible either. So, but it puts the pressure on them a little bit. They have been sitting top for a while, and now suddenly they find themselves, albeit with a game in hand, sitting below Derry. So, yeah, it makes it interesting for sure.
Yeah, Derry, so sitting top of the table at the moment, albeit with that game extra played in comparison to Shells. But one thing in regards to the club is the impact of Brexit rules in terms of recruitment of personnel outside of Ireland and the UK. And the club want the process streamlined. So there was a report from the RTÉ News' Shane O'Curreen with Derry City manager Rory Higgins, who's interviewed first in this clip that's coming up. And then the second voice you'll hear is technical director Mark McChrystal.
Former Liverpool player Andre Wisdom was unveiled as Derry City's newest signing this week. The club, who are second in the League of Ireland, have not signed a player outside of the UK and Ireland since February 2019 because of restrictive post-Brexit transfer rules.
We're obviously restricted on the areas that we can target. It's mainly Irish, British-based players, but we're not complaining about it. That's what it is. We have people in the background working extremely hard and seeing as there are ways around it. Hopefully we can find some resolution.
Derry City must obtain a permit from the UK Home Office for international players. A permit is awarded on a GBE points system. Players are assessed on international appearances, domestic minutes, continental minutes, final league position, continental progression and league quality.
It's probably aimed towards real top end players to really get through that process. So if it becomes more streamlined for us, then obviously the better that can be for us, the better that can be for the league. We haven't got anybody through this process at this moment in time. We obviously play in the FAA. I think anything to do with players coming to the north is to do with the Irish FA and the Home Office. So there's probably a case there for everybody kind of to be involved and see what we can go with.
A spokesperson for the UK Home Office said the criteria is reviewed annually with the Northern Ireland Football Association. The FAI told RTÉ News that they're working with Derry City on all Brexit-related matters. The club says the transfer process may need to be more streamlined as they're to bring continental players back to the Brandywell again. Shane O'Curran, RTÉ News, Derry.
And obviously the player that was, in terms of the signing that was mentioned there, Andre Wisdom, he was the subject of an interview in The Athletic last year in which he spoke about being stabbed in the midst of an assault and mugging by a group of men in June 2020. Definitely well worth a read because he's had to go through quite a lot in the last few years. But let's turn our attentions to Drogheda United against Sligo Rovers, because maybe you could tip Drogheda to win that game, but 7-0 is just an astonishing result. Graham, could you just talk us through this, because it was just a complete collapse from Sligo Rovers, but from a Drogheda United point of view, obviously it wipes out a huge amount of a goal difference deficit as well.
Yeah, like their goals against is 50, which is like for 28 games is nearly 2 goals a game they're conceding. So it's made a massive dent in that. I was meant to go to the game and then we left it. I only live 15 minutes away, so I was thinking, will I bring the boys? And we left it. And they came in giving out to me saying there's been 7 goals in that game, the one game you don't go. I actually was at the game with them when they beat Sligo 3-1 up there. And similar in there was a softness to Sligo that night that I referenced, and I said they were very easy to play against. They've been excellent. So I turned around and held up my hands and said I was probably a little bit harsh on Sligo last year under Johnny Russell, and they've shown patience with him, and Johnny's turned the team around, and I understand what they're trying to do in terms of fan ownership and trying to build a squad, and the youngest team in the league. So I have a lot of admiration for them. They just set pieces and transitions in this game just killed them. They conceded from a long throw was the first goal. Cross into the box was the second, I think, a header. Lost the ball, transition, like all of it was just set pieces and transitions. If they gave the ball away, they generally conceded a chance or a goal. And Drogheda were well worth it. They had a chance before half time, Sligo, where it could have made it 2-1 and might have changed the game, but Drogheda smelled blood and went for it. And Johnny Russell came out with a statement after saying he watched the reaction of his players, and he said, look, he was happy with the body language after it, but in terms of their effort and being easy to play against on the night, they were very easy played against. Crosses were coming into the box without much sort of blocks going in it. The 1v1 duels they struggled on. Any type of cross into the box, they just weren't aggressive enough. There was just no aggression in them. Even their recovery runs to run back, they tried to take a foul on Markey. Markey ends up crossing it. Pirro gets a header on a keeper, saves it, and he knocks in the rebound. And I think 2 of them tried to foul him. You're thinking one of them fouls has to stick. Like, and you take a yellow card, but you don't concede another goal. And like that, the ease at which they lost would be a small worry. But in fairness to John Russell, he has reset them quick after they've had setbacks, and he'll probably be looking to do the same here, try and get them reset and say, look, that can't happen again. they have to bring that nasty element that we touched on at the start of the show to their game. And sometimes young players need a reminder that, look, this isn't easy, and there has to be another side to the game that's not nice and not pretty, but it still has to be done to make sure you stay in the game. And I didn't think they'd done that on Friday.
Yeah, in terms of like, obviously that's a collective failure for Sligo Rovers on the day, David. But I mean, even when you look at maybe individuals who are missing, so Pineacker, when you look at his stats when they've been with him and without him. So with him in they've had 7 clean sheets in the 14 appearances that he's made, in comparison to 3 clean sheets in the 13 when he hasn't been available. And he wasn't available. He did play against UCD, in fairness, when they lost in the cup, but he didn't play against Drogheda United. Like, is there anything that you can put down maybe to even a small, like, where maybe the what might be a slowly settling defense, maybe one element goes out of it, and that can sometimes cause a bit of, can perturb a team in a certain sense?
I think he's probably he's a big player for them, and Graham's touched on the set piece goals that they gave away in particular, well, long throws and corners, and I think he'd be one that I would expect would have been organising things and as a physical presence, even just dominating the box, would certainly have been a miss for them. But I don't think you can put a 7-0 down to one player alone. And I think that's obviously a worrying result, but to go out of the cup to UCD at home is probably the one that will actually annoy fans more, because you look at the cup draw now and who's left in the competition, would have been a real opportunity for Sligo to go and have a real shot at that. And I know the type of crowd that Sligo get up there, they would have, if they got to a cup final, it would have been a huge occasion for the club. So I think that's the one that would really disappoint them when they look back on the season. Because they're going well in the league. If they finish 4th, 5th, where they are at the moment, I think it'll be a tremendous season for John Russell and what he's achieved with that group of players. And you can forgive an off night if it happens once, but I think the cup result will be the real one that will irk them more than anything. The 7-0 is just, it honestly could have been, watching the highlights, it could have been 10. Like, there was more opportunities that Drogheda didn't take there, and that is a huge worry for Sligo. It's just, how do you regroup and just need to go and get any sort of result in the next game. If it's a scrappy draw or whatever, just show real battle and bite, just to get sort of something back on the board. And as I said, it's been generally a really positive season for them. From Drogheda's point of view, it's they follow up a 9-0 in the cup, and you might look at it and say, look, the opposition isn't up to scratch, and it's a once-off. But to follow that up and win 7-0, particularly when you're down the bottom and struggling, it just gives them huge confidence. And I think they're unbeaten maybe in 6 games now since they lost the game in Oriel, which was such a big game in July when Dundalk beat them 4-2. You felt Dundalk were on the up, and it was Drogheda sort of sinking to that relegation spots. But since then, they've been unbeaten. They picked up positive, a draw with Rovers, a draw with Bows, they've beaten Waterford, they've gone and won 7-0 against Sligo. They've started to rack up points, and you look at the weekend, and Dundalk had been irked about not being able to play Pats. That's a double whammy now when Drogheda go and win 7-0. It just sort of hammers it home a little bit and makes life a little bit tougher for Dundalk. So it's interesting now to see how Dundalk respond. I think they play Shells on Friday, which looks like a cracking tie from both. From Shell's point of view, they need a win. From the Dogs' point of view, they need a win. So it's a real interesting one on Friday. But yeah, Drogheda I think just the way the signings that Drogheda have made over the window in July, Douglas James Taylor's come in. I think he's 5 goals in 6 league games, as well as a hat-trick in the cup. That seems to have helped Pirro. He's starting to score more goals as well. Obviously, he hit a huge amount of goals for Athlone last season and was one that a lot of teams chased. He ended up with Drogheda. Probably didn't hit the ground running at the beginning of the year, but now is finding form. So they have conceded, as Graham said, a huge amount of goals, but they're also on the other end of it. They're able to score. And that's for a relegation team. You look at Dundalk, on the other hand, they're probably not as free scoring, which you'd worry about, whereas Drogheda, whereas they might lose a game 3-0, they're well capable of a high scoring game where they'll nick points as well. So it makes at both ends of the table, it's a real intriguing battle. Who can go on and string wins together to take the title, and who's going to end up in that bottom spot it's going to be a real dogfight, I think.
I think 100%. I think what Kev Doherty must take credit for is he actually changed his system when James Douglas Taylor came in, and he put the two of them up front and changed to 3-5-2. And I watched a lot of Drogheda early on in the season, and Pirro was very isolated. because there wasn't many midfielders in Drogheta's team that could go beyond them. So a lot of the time he was like fighting a lonely path up there, as Dave would know. And you need runners off you, because if you come short and one of your midfielders runs, the centre back might disengage and give you that time to turn. But they just stayed engaged with Franz Perdo the whole time, and he was fighting. Every game was a battle for him, where I think now it's freed him up a little bit, where he knows if he goes short, he knows Douglas Taylor's going long over the top, and then he can spin. And they've worked out really well. They put Heaney in midfield a little bit, which gives them a lot more legs that they're able to run up and down, and Brennan. And they've been excellent, like in that new system. Kane off the left has been brilliant too. He got a goal and 2 assists. So and he got an assist in Tala. So the change of shape has really helped them. It's made them a little bit defensively more solid, because they're able to drop back into a 5. And obviously with the 2 lads up front, it's causing trouble.
Yeah, and they have a couple of opportunities in the Cup as well, in the sense of that they're playing Athlone Town, who of course have had a really good run in the Cup themselves. So that draw for the quarterfinals was made last week, and the ties to be played on the 13th, 15th of September. So on the other side of the international break, UCD up against Bowes, as I said, Athlone against Drogheda, Wexford against Treaty, and then of course the eye-catching one there, Derry City against Shells, the top 2 in the league, coming up in a Cup quarterfinal. So there's a huge opportunity for a load of clubs there to have a very memorable season through the Cup. But Shamrock Rovers and Galway United, Graham, in terms of that game, so Stephen Walsh's touch, I suppose, for that Hickey goal, and then Danny Mandroy scoring the type of goal, and if he does sort of hit the goal trail, not the type of goal he'll be scoring 2 regularly as the league season progresses.
He scored a header similar a few years ago as well, coming onto one from that angle where he just comes onto the ball and arrives onto it. Might have been a cross from Jack Bourne, if I'm remembering. But yeah, look, Rovers had a lot of the game. They had a lot of possession. Typical Galway in that their shape was really good. They defended really well. I actually felt they defended their box really well in open play. They got a lot of blocks. They didn't open their legs when people were shooting. Clark was behind a lot of the shots. But yeah, maybe a chance. I think they had the best chance the first half. It hits the inside the post. Jack Bourne then clips the crossbar with one. He checks in off the side. But a lot of the game was in front of Galway. And on the counter-attack, they looked dangerous. They had a couple of chances in that. And then the goal is like a counter-attack where Rovers cough up the ball in midfield. A great little pass into Walsh, who pulls it down over his shoulder, like on the inside of him. And he slips Hickey through. And in fairness to Hickey, he has a little bit more time than he probably. I felt Hawke could have been a little bit more aggressive at the time, because it's in the box, go and get to the ball. But Hickey steadies himself really well and fires it across goal into the far corner. And it's a brilliant goal from a Galway point of view. Again, they'd won it back in the middle of the pitch this time, so it was only 2 passes before they got into Rovers' box. And then Mandroy was so different to what they have at Rovers, in that he just wants to go that way. So he has this awareness to collect the ball and play straight into his striker and follow it. And it's like, I want to just go the quickest route to goal as possible. I used to commentate them all the time, and it was like, if he popped one through the gap, instead of going for 1-2, he just nearly run directly at the striker, and then he's at them. And that's what he brought to the game. And then he arrives onto the cross beautifully and powers a header in. And they have one then just past the post later on. But look, Rovers' consistency in the league hasn't been there this year. They probably conceded more goals this season than they've done in previous season. I know for a fact they've conceded more goals this season than they've done in previous season, and they aren't scoring as many as they have neither. So that's going to result in a lot more draws and then edge it towards defeats. They've been still dominating possession, and against Galway you'd expect them to dominate possession, but they're probably not creating as many chances as they would like. And that's led them to be where they are in the league. But like, full credit to Galway, I think they went there. Did they beat them earlier in the season, or did they draw with them as well? Stephen Walsh scored in Tala, and now they've gone and got another draw as well, and they're well in it. And because they're defensively so strong, and they're adding more to it. Cunningham at left back played really well. Yeah, so it was an interesting game. Sunday night, like this is where you go, like with the European games, the Sunday night games, the atmosphere can be a little bit dull, and you're waiting for the players to get going to ignite it, and then they're waiting for the fans, and it can be a little bit like that. And that's where the Sunday games, it's like we're last to play this week, and you know what you have to do, but there's an element of flatness to the whole day. But look, Rovers have bigger fish to fry, but they will want to make sure that they push up the league and get as close to challenging as they can.
Yeah, and in the first division, Cork City still 16 points clear. Rory Keaton scoring his first goal since coming back to win it late on against Cove Ramblers in the derby there, and the impact of that in terms of the playoff race. Cove are sixth at the moment, 5 points off Wexford, and UCD are second, Athlone third, and Bray fourth at the moment. In the Women's FAI Cup, Sligo Rovers won 3-1 at DLR Waves. Cork City beat Bows 2-1. Athlone also won 2-1 away at Treaty United, and then Shamrock Rovers and Shelbourne meet tonight, 7:45 kickoff in the fourth of those quarterfinals. Now, the Premier League before we go, and Sam Szmodics scored the opener at Manchester City. Not the best finish, but the movement and the timing of the run was really good. In terms of his impact, we spoke about it last week, David, in terms of the merits of moving to Ipswich. Obviously, it's a move up to the Premier League, his first taste of it, and he seems to have hit the ground running in terms of bringing that goal scoring form that he had in the Championship. And albeit it'll be tough to replicate those sort of numbers in the Premier League, but you know, a goal against the reigning champions, whatever way it comes, it's well worth it.
Yeah, if you can score away in the Etihad, then he should get plenty this season. It's a good start for him. Obviously, it gives him confidence coming into a new team, and you know, testing himself in the Premiership to go and score early just gives you confidence going into games, which will hopefully be a little bit easier for Ipswich. I mean, they've had a incredibly tough start at home to Liverpool and then away to Manchester City. You know, real baptism of fire. But yeah, for him it's a great start, and hopefully he can show more of that. And as you said, the goals that he got last year in the Championship, if he can even get anywhere near double figures for Ipswich, it'll be a really successful season for him. So it's good to see him and the likes of Dara O'Shea back in the Premiership as well. And the more players that we have there playing consistently, the better for Hallgrimsson and the Irish squad.
Yeah, there were a lot of clubs interested in Dara O'Shea, Graham, but he has plumped for Ipswich, who of course looked really open against Manchester City, but City of course can open up most teams, especially with the likes of Erling Haaland up front. But in terms of moving to Ipswich, who they're not established in the Premier League, there's always a risk. And look, they have a great manager in Kieran McKenna, but there's probably a sense that they're going to be fighting to try and stay in this division. What do you make of the move in the short and long term?
That's probably why they brought him in, because he's had that experience of doing it last year. He's had the experience of doing it with West Brom, and he had the experience of doing it with Burnley. So they're looking for that player who, and a lot of these will look at the stats, and so the way the recruitment's done now is they look at stats and then they go and say, right, does he match the profile we want? So Dara O'Shea's stats would have been good in terms of like defending crosses, etc., or blocks in the final third, all them things that Ipswich would have looked at and said, right, this is the one for us. He is comfortable on the ball. I remember seeing Dara play up in the lawns against Cherry Orchard when he was 15, and he was hitting diags back then, and you're thinking, yeah, he has something about him, and he's gone on to have a great career. He's done really well. He's on from Temple Oak. So yeah, another move that puts him back in the Premiership, and as David said, having as many players in the Premiership playing at that level week in, week out is massive. Because it's hard when you look back when we would have watched football growing up. Like, you had players that were in the top 6 teams that were playing and challenging and playing in the Champions League. And that, it's not unattainable, but it feels a little bit out of reach at the moment for Irish players. Obviously, Kevin Keller is with Liverpool. There's a few Irish lads gone to Newcastle who broke into the top 6 2 seasons ago. But that's the level that we try and get to, that will build your international team up as well. But the more we have in the Premiership, the better. Szmodics, I think I was talking to David Connolly at the weekend, and he said that in terms of having that nasty player that drives your team, that's what Szmodics done at Blackburn. He had that nastiness, and sometimes it's not your centre backs or your number 6s that have that drive. It might be just that little striker that like a Craig Bellamy type that just doesn't care what anyone thinks. He's just going to drive his team to be as successful as they can. And Connolly mentioned that Szmodics had a little bit of that at Blackburn, that he wasn't easy to play against. And I thought his run for the goal was brilliant. I thought the finish was good, but I thought the run was great from outside to in, and he showed a real desire to get in there. So, yeah, look, the O'Shea one long term, it depends, like, you know, because it could happen again where Ipswich get relegated and another team go up and say, look, we'll take a chance on him again. Nathan Collins done really well yesterday too. So there is good centre backs playing at a really high level for Ireland, and it's just trying to fill that gap in through midfield to try and bulk it out. We've got good goalkeepers, obviously. So yeah, great move for Dara. Delighted for him, and the Premiership is the most watched league in the world, so it's a massive draw for everybody.
Yeah, and so far, I suppose, David, the top three from last season have all made it to sort of back-to-back wins at this stage. Arsenal getting a second win, City doing what they did to Ipswich, and then, of course, Liverpool, first home game for Arne Slot, winning against Brentford there as well. So for those, maybe it's probably too early to judge, particularly Liverpool as well, given obviously they've United coming up not too very far in the future, but it'll be interesting to see how they develop.
Yeah, I think the main question mark is probably over Liverpool, and they had a very good pre-season, really impressive performances in pre-season, but you never always carries through. Sometimes teams have poor pre-seasons and they start off well in the league. So yeah, back-to-back wins, I think a perfect start for Slot, and I think from my perspective, I thought those three again would be the front runners for the league, and they've all started well. City's performance against Ipswich, probably, again, you might have thought, will Man City slip off it slightly? You look at our own league, Rovers have won 4 in a row, just a slight dip in form, it can happen, just even with 1 or 2 players leaving, or, maybe just when you build that success, it's hard to maintain it. And Manchester City, I thought maybe this might be the year they just slightly dip in form, but they've started so well again. Haaland looking imperious, so it's up to Arsenal and Liverpool to try and challenge them. And in fairness to Arsenal as well, they've gone and beaten Villa, a team that they didn't manage to beat last year, and albeit probably with the helping hand of a couple of misses from Watkins in that game, it still won't matter to them now. They've gone away from home to Villa, a tough opponent who've obviously done so well last year and won, and they'll see that themselves as a step forward, as an improvement from last season. So yeah, those three, hopefully, a bit like last year, it was a great battle up until probably Liverpool slipped off at near the end of the season. But if it's similar this year with those three going as front runners, it'll be an interesting title race. But yeah, I think the concern for Arsenal and Liverpool will be how City have started again.
Yeah, and I suppose finally, Graham, Manchester United and Brighton, that would have been, I suppose, interesting from an Irish perspective, where you're looking out for when Evan Ferguson's come back. He still hasn't returned as of yet, but from a Manchester United point of view, the high, maybe if you want to call it that, of winning their opening game against Fulham, there's been a little bit of a dent now, even though I suppose they've some encouraging aspects of their performance, but overall as well, they're still very much a work in progress.
Yeah, they are. I thought they played without a striker. Zerki came on, but they played with Bruno Fernandes as a false 9. But I just don't think, if you're going to do that, you need Rashford and you need Diallo to make runs on the inside a little bit more and really stretch Brighton. And they didn't do that enough in the first half. I thought when he came on the second half, he had a bit more of a focal point. But yeah, Look, you get accused of sort of being overly critical of Manchester United sometimes, and you're like, well, but a lot of people have put Manchester United in people's top 4 here, and you're saying, well, they are a work in progress. Do I think they make top 4? I don't know. I think they're capable of one-off games of really high-level performances, which we've seen against City in the FA Cup final. But over the course of the league, are they consistent enough? I'm not sure. The scrutiny to come under is because they've one of the biggest wage bills in the league as well. So are they getting value for what they have? They have restructured behind the scenes, and that's the work in progress that's going to come in, where they're hoping the recruitment is better, they're hoping the processes are better. But in terms of just making that jump to challenge that top 3 of Man City, Arsenal and Liverpool, I don't think they're going to do it. I heard Jamie Carragher speaking yesterday that Slot will bring a bit more control to Liverpool, that when they're winning, it's just 2-0 routine, good luck, like a little bit like, oh, here we go again. It's just a win where you turned up to Liverpool because anything could happen. You watch the Liverpool game because you think this could end up 4-3. And the year they won the league was probably when they had the most control, and that possession stats were a bit higher. But yeah, so it's an interesting league. I agree with David. I thought Arsenal were okay again. I thought Villa were really good. Watkins should have put them ahead twice. The saves that the second save Ray makes is unbelievable. But Arsenal should have been down, and then they go and get 2 goals from half chances. So yeah, it shows them that they're willing to stay in the game a little bit more. But in terms of their performance, I wouldn't be saying, oh yeah, they're there. But Man City, Haaland just looks so fresh compared to everybody else. He looks so powerful, looks so strong. And it's going to take a lot to just stop him alone.
Yeah, and I suppose even in the Arsenal performance, they would have been always accused of probably lacking the type of players we were talking about at the start of the season. But Ben White quietly does that. I think there was a moment where he boots the ball at John McGinn after John McGinn went in on Saliba, and you kind of, I suppose, they're the kind of things you want to see in a team as well. You want that kind of, I suppose, a bit of the dark arts as well.
Yeah, it's having that thing of, I touch on all the time. And it never bothered me if somebody off the other opposition didn't like me, because I'm like, well, I don't play for you. Like, and it's only afterwards that you sit and talk. A good friend of mine, Pat Flynn, would have been similar. Everybody looked at Flinny and said, he's an absolute tool. But when you get to know him, like I worked with him, done a lot of coaching with him, and he used to say, I thought you were this, and I go, well, I thought you were that. And then you go, but when you retire and all that goes, you can end up having good conversations with a lot of players. Like, like I played against Dave when he was at UCD, I think, and would have been like, he probably thought, who's this guy? But afterwards, then you meet people outside of that competitive environment, and you're like, actually, he's all right. And it's the same. Scott Brown's a bit like that when he was playing for Celtic. You'd meet him outside of it, and you think, he's all right. On the pitch, you're thinking, what an absolute weapon. But like, you need them players at times. Chris Shields was like that. All the Dundalk lads loved Chris Shields, but on the pitch you're thinking, who's this guy? Like, but and sometimes you need them, but it's that not really overly concerned about what the opposition think of you. There's nothing wrong with that. Like, I think Ben White doesn't care what anyone thinks of him looking at him.
No, he certainly doesn't, because I think he's also that thing about him not supposedly liking football or whatever, like in terms of as a hobby, but he doesn't mind. He just kind of gets on with it. And
David was a nice guy, in fairness. David was one of the, he was a nice fella. Yeah.
Fair enough. Anyway, so nice guy, David. Thanks very much for coming on. And Graham, also thanks a million for your time as well.
Pleasure, lads.